Wonderful. Good morning, Unionville Alliance Church. It's such a great morning to be worshiping with you all. Thank you so much, worship team, for that beautiful time of worship already, setting our hearts to be ready for this Mission Sunday. And so that song, God of Justice, is one of my favorites. And so it's so good to be able to just sit in it before coming up here to share the word with you. And so it's a joy and privilege to be joining all of you this morning for Mission Sunday. And I just want to, first of all, thank Pastor Daniel. He was sitting right here, but thank you, Pastor Daniel, for inviting me to share a message with your church this morning, and also just a bit of my family's testimony. So I'm excited to do that with you all. And so my name is Aimee Esparaz, and I oversee Compassion Canada's partnerships here in Ontario. While this is now my vocation, my job, I don't consider it as a job. I consider it as a calling. And so God really birthed this passion for global missions in my family's heart, and especially for Compassion's ministry, actually, long before I joined the staff team. And so this morning, I'd like to share with you all how God used this experience to enlighten my husband and me about not only how to raise our family, but on how to live generous lives, on how to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And so we just celebrated Easter, right? And I'm sure many of you are reflecting on Jesus' sacrifice so that we can live transformed lives. And so for me, each time Easter rolls around, I think of how we can live as people of the resurrection. And my thoughts always go to the families that our family has had the privilege to meet over these many years, as we spent many summers. Speaking of missions trip to Nepal, our family spent many summers in the global south, actually visiting children whom we sponsor with Compassion Canada. On our, instead of like a family vacation, this is what we would do during summertime as we sponsored different children in different countries during that season of our lives. So it's been 13 years, actually, since that very first trip that we made to the Philippines back in 2011. And I call that trip the trip that changed the trajectory of our family's life. And It was a trip that helped us to live more as people of the resurrection. And I want to take you on that journey this morning. Okay, and so first of all, though, I want to introduce you to my family. My husband, Floyd, and I, while we are both ethnically Chinese, we were both born and raised in the Philippines. So those of you who have done the virtual reality already before service, you would have met Floyd. He's down in the basement helping us run the VR. And so we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. And we have two children, Alyssa, whom you will meet later on. She's going to speak to us also, and Jonathan. And so Alyssa also works at Compassion. She is our manager of content and public relations. And as I mentioned, she'll share a bit of our family story with you as well this morning. And then Jonathan, he is not with us this morning. He is a software engineer. And I'd like to say that my claim to fame as a mom is that I'm a mom of a boy who can solve the Rubik's Cube in less than 10 seconds. And so, so yes, although he would probably be like, Mom, don't talk about that. Anyways, we live in Pickering, so not far from here, and we love the Toronto Raptors. We're Filipinos at heart. We love basketball. All right, and so I'd like to start, actually, my message with one of my favorite verses, and it's the words of Jesus from the book of Luke, chapter 6, verse 38. And I'm reading from the Passion Translation, and it's on the screen right now. It says, "Give generously, and generous gifts will be given back to you, shaken down to make room for more. abundant gifts will pour out upon you with such an overflowing measure that it will run over the top. Your measurement of generosity becomes the measurement of your return. So God has definitely shown this verse to be true for us in our family's life. So in my role with Compassion, I get to share with church communities, just like I'm doing today, and fellow Jesus followers about God's heart for the poor and how Compassion's ministry fits into that. I love that every day I get to play a part in releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. However, it wasn't always like that. Believe it or not, there was a time in my life where I did not care at all that 1 billion children are experiencing multifaceted challenges because of poverty. It's hard to believe, especially since I was born and raised in the Philippines, right? When I was growing up in the Philippines, I was oblivious to those living in poverty, even though they literally existed right outside the gates of my childhood home, just like you see on the screen, the photo on the screen. I snapped that during that trip when we were there in 2011, this photo. So my family was part of what I would now call an inward-focused church, teaching us that God's blessings are for us to enjoy, to make our lives more comfortable. And so as you can imagine, considering God's heart for the poor wasn't even an option for me, really. It wasn't a part of my mindset or my worldview or my vocabulary, to be quite honest. And so after getting married, my husband Floyd and I, we wanted to raise our family differently. We started to think to ourselves, if we say that we are saved by God's grace, but God's grace hasn't saved us from our indifferences towards injustices, then maybe we haven't actually experienced saving grace. Like there's no evidence of that in our life, right? And so this realization made us willing to be more open, to open our hearts and our minds, and to allow our hearts to be broken for the things that break the heart of God. It was only then when we surrendered that we started to really see and understand God's heart for the poor. So soon after that, God impressed upon our heart this desire to raise our children to be truly great. Now I put air quotes on there because it's not as the world would define greatness. We felt that God was telling us that He wanted us to raise our kids to be great in His kingdom. Children who would grow up to realize their privilege, to acknowledge their own poverty, and to use what God has given them, has blessed them, to bless others who are in need. And so we're like, okay, how do we do that? We started to ask these questions. How is true greatness defined after all? What do great kids look like? And how do we make sure that we are raising our kids to be truly great? So we came to realize that it is only when our children learn to embrace a lifestyle of compassion and biblical justice and choose to call it their own, not like they're following their dad and mom, but to choose to call it their own. Only then have we successfully raised them to be truly great. I read a book back then. It's written by Dr. Tim Kimmel, and this quote has always stayed with me. It says, it's a parenting book. I think it's called True Greatness, actually, by Tim Kimmel. Don't quote me, though. But this quote is from that book. It says, "True greatness is a passionate love for God that demonstrates itself in an unquenchable love and concern for others." This short quote is packed with meaning. It seems simple, but it's really very meaningful, right? First of all, true greatness is a passionate love for God. This is knowing that our identity is rooted in being children of God and nothing else. Just like how it says in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 to 9, "For it's by grace that we have been saved, through faith and not from ourselves. it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. But the salvation is also demonstrated, it's worked out, it's seen, and it's proven, right, through an unquenchable love and concern for other people, especially those in need. And Ephesians chapter 2 goes on to say in verse 10, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." And so as parents, we felt that our children needed to understand salvation in this context. And so as a result, we got busy and we sprang into action. So at this time, I'd like to invite Alyssa to share this next kind of segment of our family's testimony as a reflection of how it was like to grow up in a family like ours.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a joy to share this time with my mom this morning and to be worshiping with you all today. And yeah, as long as I can remember, this was a part of our story that my parents involved my younger brother and I in local and global missions, whether that was sending gift boxes to kids in poverty around the world at Christmas time, or regularly volunteering to serve dinner to unhoused people here in the GTA. And we were regularly involved in ministry to children and families experiencing poverty. And Compassion's ministry entered our story when I was 12 years old, and it was actually my fault. I read about Compassion in a magazine, and I thought, this is such a cool thing. I really want to be a part of this. I really didn't know much about it, but I knew that, this is something that had been instilled in me since I was young, and I really wanted this to be a part of our family. And so I said to my parents that year, I was 12, I said, all I want for Christmas is a little sister. And then I paused. And then I said, not an actual little sister, just a little sister with compassion. And they thought, that is way easier. We can definitely do that. I'm just like, I work in communications. I know how to get people to, communicate. I know to communicate what I want. And so we did. We sponsored a child that Christmas, and we ended up sponsoring Florian Lin from the Philippines. And, as my parents' desire was to raise my brother and I to be missionally minded, God honored that desire in their hearts. And it, this vision and this mission captured our hearts and opened our eyes to recognize our own privilege, the power that we have, the resources that we have, the way that we've been blessed, which in so many ways, if we're not careful, can become your own kind of poverty, right? A poverty of having too much and being blind to the needs of others. And so as we kind of had this perspective opened up in the months leading up to the summer of 2011, my parents really felt God saying to them that if they were truly serious about this, then they needed to take my brother and I, we were 14 and 10 at the time, to see extreme poverty firsthand and to open our eyes and our perspective to that. And that is the summer that we went on this trip that changed everything. And we retraced our roots and went on a self-guided missions trip to the Philippines. And looking back now, I really understand what an investment this was for our family. My parents really didn't have disposable income to be spending on vacations, let alone a 3-week trip halfway around the world. And yet they listened to the leading of the Holy Spirit in that season. And, my parents knew that the only appropriate response when the Holy Spirit prompts you to do something is to obey. And even 13 years later, I can say I can see the fruit of that obedience. And so we traveled to the Philippines that summer with the goal of immersing ourselves in a reality that is a stark contrast to our everyday life here in the GTA. And I can tell you now it was hands down just the worthiest financial investment my parents have ever made for our family. And so our first stop was to visit our Compassion child, Florian Lin, who we sponsored that Christmas, in an island called Masbate. And this island is considered amongst the poorest communities in the Philippines. In fact, when we were back home in the Philippines, we'd shared with our family who we were staying with, like, hey, we're going to this island to visit a child that we sponsor. And they were like, you're going where? is your plane ticket already booked? Like, we don't think you should go. Like, it's dangerous. That's not a place where people go. But we were like, no, this is actually why we came, not to see you, but to see this little girl. And so it was our first time seeing Compassion's ministry firsthand. And, this was many years before both my mom and I joined the Compassion Canada staff team. And what we saw amazed us. You will often hear us talk at Compassion about what we call the 3 C's, really everything that you need to know about Compassion in 3 words that all start with the same letter to help you remember them. And that is Christ, child, and church. We are Christ-centered, we're child-focused, and we're church-driven. Those are the pillars that guide our ministry all around the world. And we really saw this to be true in Florian Lynn's community. There was this local church on this island where nobody really wanted to go. No one wants to be a part of it. There's this local church, much like this one, just a vibrant community that is reaching out to its neighbors, driven by its partnership with Compassion and ministering to who the Bible calls the least of these in amazing ways that we really had never seen or experienced before. We came to realize that this is a ministry that invites us to partner with local churches all around the world as part of our everyday lives. It gives us an opportunity to be a missionary to a child and their family and tangibly share this Christ-centered Jesus love with them in real and tangible ways. And so today, you can see on the screen now that Florian Lynn is all grown up, much no longer the little girl that we met on this trip. She has graduated from the Compassion program now after we sponsored her for over 12 years. And she is now working towards her Bachelor of Elementary Education at university. And we are just so, so proud of her. On that same trip, we actually met another Compassion child. She was older. Her name is Rochelle. And she lived in the slums of Cebu City, which is the city where my parents grew up. And Rochelle was just starting university at that time and needed a new sponsor. And the condition of her home really honestly shocked us and broke our hearts. We were invited into their home to visit, and it was basically a crawl space. You couldn't stand up fully in their home. They shared that each time it rained, which if you know anything about the Philippines is quite often, their home would flood. And yet because of Compassion's ministry and Compassion's investment into her life, Rochelle had beaten the odds. She was doing something that kids from her community typically do not do, and that was that she was studying in university to become a teacher. And needless to say, our family was moved to become Rochelle's new sponsor after spending that day with her. And in 2015, Rochelle graduated with an undergraduate degree in education, and she's now a licensed public school teacher. She often still will send us updates of what's going on in her classroom or what's happening. And, we're, again, just so proud of being able to, for me, just remember this sister that I have across the ocean and just hear about things like she when she took her licensure exam to become a teacher, she did so as one of the top candidates in the country. And these are just those stories where you realize, like, the investment that you make, you never know the ripple effect that it will have. And it has made such an impact, not only in Rochelle's life and Florian Lynn's life, but I hope that you're hearing and you can see the impact that it's made in my life and in our family's life. So I want to hand this back to my mom to share the rest of the story with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. And just an update on Rochelle. She is actually getting married in November of this year. And so, she just shared that news with us. And she is marrying someone who is very active in their church community, in the community where she grew up in. They continue to serve the people there. And something I wanted to share with you guys that is a favorite statistics about Compassion Children, and this is by independent research actually, is that Compassion kids who grew up in the Compassion Program are 70% more likely to be church leaders in their community. And so that's a really amazing statistics that, Compassion is very proud of, right? And that's on top of all the other statistics, as in, they get better jobs, they don't have like second generation poverty, all those things are given, right? But not every organization can say that the product of our organization, they are church leaders. And so I personally am very excited about that. And so, so back to our story. Friends, that step of faith, that saying yes to that trip in 2011, despite not really having room in our family budget for it, it was the catalyst to seeing this more that God wanted to show us. And it's this, really. We came home and realized this is what God was wanting to show us. That God's heart for the poor is also for us, for our poverty of having too much. When contrasted with both Florian Lynn's and Rochelle's poverty of not having enough, even our limited family budget is more than enough. And so as a result, more of Jesus' words from the book of Luke came alive for us. And this time it's from chapter 4, verse 18. And it says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." This was how Jesus himself started his ministry here on earth, right? It's really like the heartbeat of missions, to see good news proclaimed to the poor, both to those who are suffering from the poverty of not having enough, such as those families and children that Compassion serve, but equally importantly, it's good news to those of us who are afflicted with the poverty of having too much. And so looking back now, I could never have imagined that God would, that God-given desire to raise kids differently, to raise kids to be truly great, that it would profoundly impact them in a way that that is so different, that the world sees so differently, and that it impacted them with the gospel in a way that we normally wouldn't think of. Right? And so that trip to the Philippines really led us into this lifestyle of advocating for children and families living in extreme poverty. And that's why I say it's changed the trajectory of our family's life. And so there's an author and blogger. Her name is Ann Voskamp. She lives here in Ontario, actually, if you guys don't know her. She's a good friend of mine. And so I love this quote that she wrote on one of her blog posts before. And she said, "Parenting is never about how your kids turn out. It's always and only about how you keep turning towards your kids and their maker." And so God's grace is truly amazing, which brings me back to Jesus' words from Luke chapter 6, verse 38, which I started my message with this morning. And so this time I'm going to read from the Message translation. And it says, "Give your life away. You find life given back. Not merely given back, but given back with a bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting, is the way. Generosity begets generosity." My husband Floyd and I were deeply grateful to God for putting that desire in our hearts to raise children who are truly great and to do the hard but important work of intentionally shaping their worldview towards the things that break the heart of God. And so as a result, we have come to see Luke chapter 6:38 become a reality in our family's life, as God continues, even to this day, to invite us to spend ourselves on behalf of the least of these. The blessings that we've received in return are ones that are exceedingly more than all that we could ever have asked for or imagined. way back then, right? And so, firstly, I'll just share three things. Firstly, God has allowed both Alyssa and I to have vocational ministry roles with Compassion, to be part of connecting thousands of Jesus followers across the GTA with children and families who live in extreme poverty, resulting in lives transformed on both sides. Secondly, I would say God has brought profound life transformation to us personally through the gift of being in close proximity with the marginalized. Not only just like here at home through helping alleviate like child poverty or homelessness here at home, but specifically globally, as he's allowed us to have direct relationship with at least 25 Compassion children that our family have sponsored over this last 15 years or so, including the two that we've shared their stories with you this morning. And so it has really shaped the way that we live our lives. And it's this, to live simply so others may simply live. And so our summer trips have taken us to places we've continued to travel during the summer before COVID hit, to places like Guatemala and Haiti and Thailand, and not only to visit the Compassion children that we sponsor in those countries, but also to continue enlarging our worldview by seeing how people live in those communities. And so lastly, the third blessing, I would say, and the best gift we've received as a result is this. Our kids are now young adults, and they know what it means to be truly great in God's kingdom. Today, as a proud mom of these two amazing young adults, I now learn from them each day as they inspire me how to live generously and to give of their lives to those in need. And so there's another blogger and author, she's American though, that I love also. Her name is Kristen Welch, and she wrote this: I want my kids to surpass me in kindness, outweigh me in love for others, and outgive me in generosity. I don't want to be the ceiling to their potential. I want to be their floor. And really, yeah, that captures it all, right? And I want to bring us back to Luke chapter 6, verse 38, because it sums it up well. It says, give generously, and generous gifts will be given back to you, shaken down to make room for more. Abundant gifts will be poured out upon you with such an overflowing measure that it will run over the top. Your measurement of generosity becomes the measurement of your return. And so thank you for leaning in with me today, friends. And my time is almost up. But before that, I'd like to end with an invitation for you. I hope that through my family's story, you have come to know that God is also inviting you to join him in enlarging his kingdom. Will you join us in this journey of living simply and giving generously? I'd like to tell you just one more story before I end with my invitation. And it is about a young lady named Ria. Ria is a Compassion alumna from the Philippines also, and I've had the joint privilege of actually having her join my team here at Compassion Canada a couple years ago. She's the very first alumni to join the staff team at Compassion Canada, and I'd like you to meet Ria by watching this video, and then I will close with the details of my invitation for you.
If only you knew how God is going to use your life to change someone else's life. My name is Ria Calao, and I grew up in Baguio City, Philippines. My mom was a housewife and my father was doing a lot of jobs. At a very young age, we were able to understand that we cannot afford the things we need. So when I was young, my father used to pick me up from school and I wait for him until his job is done. So a colleague of his saw me and him working together. That gave that person the idea to sign me up for Compassion. At first, it's like, you can't believe that someone would see that, right? Someone would actually give you a gift a gift of new life or a gift of opportunity like that. But somehow she saw something in me. Compassion was a place where I can have food, medical assistance, fare, going to school. But it was actually more than that. So I met a sponsor. She is from the US, and she started sponsoring me when she was in the university. She was a big sister to me, and she was this type of sponsor who would send me tons of letters like cards, postcards, stickers, even photos. The letters that she gave to me, I actually have it still until now. They are my little treasures. She always treated me as her family. How come the stranger tells me that I love you, I care for you, I pray for you? That's how I felt the love of Jesus. It was through my sponsors and the people in my child center. They give me this confidence that I am somebody. Knowing that someone cares for you, it changes you. She's the reason I wanted to help others too. I just wanted to let another child feel the love that I felt when she sponsored me.
Awesome. Brothers and sisters, so here's my invitation for you. As Pastor Daniel said earlier, you have an opportunity today to take action and to sponsor a child just like Ria or Florian Lynn or Rochelle, right? Or this little boy. Speaking of living as people of the resurrection, this little boy is a 2-year-old boy who lives in the Philippines, and his name is Risen. How awesome is that, right? Risen. And so there will be child profiles outside in the table, just like Risen's profile. And it is $57 per month to sponsor a child, $47 to sponsor this specific child, and then $10 more going towards urgent needs across Compassion's ministry. And honestly, it's way less than what a night out for dinner would cost these days, right? You ask me how I know that. I know that because we used to eat out a lot as a family. But during the COVID pandemic, we came up with this cooking schedule, and each person cooks each night, and then we would only eat out once a week, only. And we've kept that until now. We're actually quite proud of ourselves for keeping up this schedule, this cooking schedule, up until now. And so we've realized that's money we've been able to set aside to help release more children from poverty in Jesus' name with Compassion. So perhaps for you, it's giving up that Starbucks order twice a week. Also, ask me why I know that too. Quite embarrassing. Or, going for a lower cable TV package, perhaps, right? Whatever it looks like for you, I believe that each one of us, every one of us, has room to sponsor at least one child when we consider what we can give up within our budget, so as to live as people of the resurrection. So did you know that after decades of steady progress, extreme poverty increased for the first time in a generation during the COVID-19 pandemic? So since my kids were born, poverty has been steadily decreasing, right, over 25, 30 years. And then COVID hit. And for the first time in a generation, it's reversed. So as I already mentioned, 1 billion children today worldwide are experiencing multidimensional poverty, which means they lack basic necessities like nutritious food and safe water and sanitation. 1 billion children, and Compassion is only reaching 2 million of them. And so we need more people to join the fight against poverty. So I believe God has equipped His church for such a time as this, that when we give generously, God will honor that, and our impact for children and families living in poverty will be greater than we could ever imagine. your church leadership has prayerfully considered, as Pastor Daniel said, this has been many years in the making, and we're super excited to see this Compassion Sunday finally be a reality. And so they've been prayerfully considering how to invite all of you to partner with Compassion and decided on choosing children. So they asked me to choose children in our program that are being ministered to by Compassion Frontline Churches in 4 countries that are also Alliance churches, CNMA churches. So these 4 countries are Burkina Faso, Philippines, Ecuador, and Peru. And those are all the kids you see at the table out here or downstairs. Every child is connected to a CNMA church in one of those 4 countries. And so the reason for that is so that we can plan missions trips for you guys later to be able to collectively, corporately visit these communities, and that your impact will be greater as it is focused on CNMA churches in the field. So I would love to meet all of you at the Compassion table after the service today to help you choose a child to sponsor. And today, as a thank you from Compassion, if you sponsor a child, you'll receive a free copy of our devotional called Eyes to See, Reflecting God's Love to a World in Need. It is our 30-day devotional, and it comes with 6 films as well. So you would do it over 6 weeks. And so for those watching online, there is a webpage that you can visit so that you can also take action as well. So brothers and sisters, I hope that we will lean into this invitation to live generous and grateful lives as people of the resurrection, to shine a light in the darkness, just like Isaiah 58 says, the passage that was read for us earlier today, and that we would get this privilege of witnessing generosity begetting generosity. Thank you again so much for letting me share with you this morning. I hope to meet many of you after the service today.